Joe Budden reveals how much he pays his cast. Now, there is an article that just dropped where Joe Budden revealed certain intimate details of his podcast, or what he would like to think are intimate. And one of the biggest things he said was that his cast makes $1.5 million as a collective. Now, the article would outline a bunch of other things, but I think that is the biggest thing that a lot of people were focused on because it reveals a lot about the business of podcasting and can also kind of reveal why so many of the cast members stay there despite saying they want to leave. So 1.5 million divided amongst like 8 people, because I think that cast is like 7, 8 people on it, is around $200,000 each. Now, there's obviously going to be a pecking order, but you can kind of infer what people are making from that. Now, I do wonder why Joe did this kind of fluff piece by the New York Times. Now, I got to tell you, this was a cool article. I think it's dope that Joe revealed that he made $20 million off podcasting per year while he was signed to Patreon. But I don't think the details were as intimate as I would have liked. Like, I would have liked some more knowledge of the ads. I would like to know what that made. I would like to know more knowledge about how they got the ads. They just said that they handled their ads, and it's not like iHeart or Sirius, who they go to creators and say, "Hey, we'll get the ads for you." Because as someone who has to handle my ads myself, I know that there's a bigger process of that. I know there's outreach you have to do. How do you get those ads? What about the on-air integrations? Do you get paid when you mention certain topics or certain shows? So to me, I think this was a bit of a nothing burger in that regard, and an attempt by Joe or whoever this writer was to position the Joe Budden podcast as being just as profitable as its peers in the space. And good by golly, is it? $20 million a year is big. That's a big thing for an independent outlet. I know some people don't think he's independent, but he is independent. Like, he doesn't have an iHeart next to him. He doesn't have a ad company next to him like Charlemagne does with the Black Effect Network. Often I wonder the details of the Black Effect Network because I feel like it's just iHeart. And if Charlemagne leaves, they will retain ownership of the Black Effect Network. But there were other details within this article, one of them being that the Spotify deal was about 44 million over the course of 2 years, but it would have involved, removing all of his content from YouTube. However, I did recall Joe saying the deal was like in the 20 millions. So now I'm thinking like maybe Spotify's deal wasn't that bad if it was 2 years. Okay, so here's what happened. There was a $44 million deal that was likely served, and they were like, remove the content from YouTube. But then they offered half of that when the audio deal was offered, and they said you could keep your content on YouTube, but we're going to cut this in half and you could retain ownership of 20 million for 20 million instead. So I guess that's what he meant by the $20 million deal. But that was significant. And also, the screenshot blunder of Joe Budden posting to his Instagram, the Patreon earnings was mentioned. There was, it seemed like Ian Schwartzman and Joe didn't like that happened, but they tried to spin it into something. I would wonder if the NY Times article was as a result of like trying to clean up that leak, or if it was planned ahead of time, like maybe they were going to cover something else. And instead, when that leaked, they were like, all right, let's pivot. Let's do a cleanup of this. And they used the NY Times article in order to kind of manicure that rollout. But there was also other details about Patreon and kind of what that was going on. Like in this piece right here, the money coming in. Part of the article, they say, so far this year, the Joe Budden Network has earned an average of $1.4 million per month on Patreon. It has about 70,000 paying subscribers, with subscriptions ranging from $5 to $50 per month, with higher tiers granted access to more episodes, all things we already know. This means its 2025 subscription revenue would exceed $12 million, enough to make Joe Budden the top earner on Patreon. that status and Mr. Budden's figures were confirmed by a spokeswoman for Patreon. So Patreon itself has confirmed Joe Budden is the highest earner at Patreon. That's right. He's ahead of guys like Andrew Schultz. He's ahead of guys like Shane Gillis. And I think you might see a lot of people raise their Patreon because of this article. So thanks, Joe. And there's even more details about what I mentioned prior, with Mr. Budden in this article being referred to as a podcast that sells its own ads, unlike many other top podcasters who team up with large networks like iHeart, Wondery, or Sirius and split the ad revenue. I usually believe that the industry rate for taking money from ads is 15%. So let's say I'm Science of the Black Effect Network, right? Because Charlemagne loves me so much. And they bring me an ad for Boost Mobile. And they're like, Danny, based on your listenership, it's $1,000. That's what we were able to get Boost Mobile to pay. And as a result, we're going to take $150 because that's the 15% we take from your ad. Now, $150 might seem like a little bit, but when you have a network of ads that air, multiple times per week, if you have like 30 podcasts, maybe 100, multiply 100 times $150, and then multiply that times another 100, because they may have separate podcasts that they might air 3 times a week. They might air 4 times a week. They might air 5 times a week. And boom, you have a burgeoning network, which is why, these networks are so pivotal, because they actually have the relationships with these ad companies and these third-party advertisers like Horizon Media, all of these companies that you don't know about that have the direct connections to places like Pepsi, Boost Mobile, and so on and so forth. On top of that, Joe Budden in this article also talks about the production fees, marketing expenses, and real estate costs. The company, the Joe Budden podcast, the Joe Budden Network, is in the process of purchasing for roughly $2 million the waterfront condominium unit in Edgewater, New Jersey, where it records audio and video for the Joe Budden podcast. It currently rents the unit. Residents in the building have complained. Everybody knows about that, the whole incident where Joe Budden walked out butt naked. But we also have to talk about how that's an edge for Joe, because a lot of other places, they have to signify themselves as commercial. So like, right, iHeart can't go and just record in somebody's apartment. They have to have a office dedicated. So that gives him an edge in this type of setting. And I do want to go back to what I said about the salaries that everybody is making. In this part right here, they highlight how the Joe Budden Network employs more than 30 independent contractors in roles such as production and administrative support. Payment of these contractors are the on-air talent, and it's the biggest expense. For example, more than $1.5 million annually goes to the co-hosts of the Joe Budden podcast. They even had their whole governments in there. They include Trevor Robinson, known as Queens Flip, Mark Lamont Hill, Melissa Ford, Parks Valley, Antoine Marby, Ish, and Lamar Burney, known as Ice. That's right. They put Ice's whole government on there, man. Insane. So, like I said, all you gotta do is divide 1.5 million by 8, and you're gonna get around $200,000. But there's gonna be varying levels of how much each person gets paid. Also, you have to consider the other folks who have been on the network, folks like Imani, Kino, the wives. I'm not buying for a second the wives aren't getting paid. I think that the Pod Wives folks are getting paid. So you got to just see, what was the purpose of this? What was the point of this? I think the point of this was, I believe Ian and Joe, when they say that they did it for transparency, but I also think of the people in media, Joe Budden hasn't had an opportunity to get his victory lap, right? Charlemagne gets to win the PR battle because he has Vulture, Variety, all of these people constantly posting, Charlemagne is doing this, Charlemagne is doing that. Joe, because he's on a Patreon deal or something like that, where people don't get to see the expenses or see how much money he's making. He's never got that. He's never got the big Barstool, Gillian Wallow. Oh, these guys are making so much money. And this is going to make a big effort to, there's going to be a big effort to discredit this. A lot of folks are going to come out the woodwork and start hating on this. Very similar to what happened with Joe Budden when he was #1 on the complex media list. You're going to see people start to say, I make more than that. Oh, I do 200 million. Because Gideon Wallow, they were saying something like that. Like, I make baseball numbers. But, I mean, this is a different game Joe's playing. It's a different game he's playing. He owns his IP all the way. I don't know if Gillian Wallow owned their IP. I don't know if they could walk away and do whatever they want with all of the episodes that they have recorded for Barstool. Same thing with Deezus and Mero. Remember, they did so many episodes for Vice. They did so many episodes for Showtime. And those YouTube channels are dormant. So the people are playing a different game. I think Joe, with this revelation, is about to get so much hate just because there's certain numbers being thrown out, and him being the top earner at Patreon, that is groundbreaking. The other people on Patreon who post their content are white. White. Most of this country is, the listenership is white, right? So for Joe Budden to go on one of these platforms and be the #1 guy, regardless of all of his warts, because he's a deeply flawed individual with a crazy propensity for drama and messy nonsense, he still accomplished that. And you got to give him his flowers, even if you don't. Like I said, the biggest revelation is how much the cast is making. And that $250,000 range, I even dispute that. I wonder if that's really the case. But it would make sense because, like I said before, man, Flip talks all that mess about how he's trying to get more money, how he's trying to do this and that, but he can't leave because it's so dependable. That check gonna be there. And they're independent contractors, which everybody is in podcasting. All right, y'all, but let me know what you think of the article. Make sure you go read it on the New York Times. I paid my subscription to read it. Interesting that you have to pay to read it. It's Joe is always behind the paywall, even when he's trying to promote himself. All right, y'all, follow me on Instagram, The Stop TV. Follow me on Twitter, The Stop TV. And before I go, I also wanted to highlight that this article positions Ian Schwartzman as a business partner. He's not an independent contractor like the rest of the cast. All right, y'all. The plot thickens. This is Danny from The Stop. Peace.